It's a total honor to sharing the stage with you, Mitchell. As you know from the program, this one conversation was meant to be directly after the talk with Larry Lessig. That's why I want to have a little connection to his talk, because in his book, Code is Law, he was describing 4 different ways of how you can regulate behavior. One was law itself. Law can regulate what is allowed and what is not allowed. Another one is markets. You can make things cheap or expensive and thus make people want it more or less. Another one is code or structure, where you can make things technically possible or impossible. And the last one is social norms, where you make things or behavior socially acceptable or not. We talked before in the discussion with Larry Lessig about democracy and how people lost trust in government. Now, I believe that if one of those ways to regulate behavior, like laws and government, does not work, which we currently see, then we have to put emphasis on the other ways of doing this. And I believe that with Mozilla, you are actually trying to do it on 3 different ways: the market, the code or architecture, and the social norms, to build trust again in the system. And I would now like to know from you how you actually try to do this, how you build in trust by design, for example, to talk about structures.
Well, first I'll say I'm not actually a believer in trust by design, because we're learning just how irrational human beings are, and that we trust things based on, a sense of feel, and that the things that we trust are often not trustworthy. So I'm more interested in how we build in the traits of trustworthiness than whether or not somebody actually trusts me. We know that it's not just government. Like every significant institution globally, not every, almost every significant institution globally is suffering a crisis of trust. So as we come out of the industrial era and we move into the current digital era or virtual era or wherever it comes next, the things that made other institutions seem trustworthy in the past don't apply anymore. So what are the things in any area, what are the traits that you would build into an organization to make it trustworthy? And so we try to experiment with Mozilla. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's painful. We try to build in, I'd say, 4 things. 1, transparency. Mm-hmm. Every time you have a secret, you are requiring someone to trust you. So, and Mozilla has some secrets too, usually from other companies, but that's a flaw in trustworthiness. Mm. A second one is, the degree to which someone can participate. It's great, like SEC disclosure is great, but that's just knowledge. It's not actual ability to participate. So we build open source, of course, for transparency. We build open systems so people can get involved. There's a verification piece you need for an institution to be trustworthy. And then we try to build a system where risk, reward, and responsibility are tied together. Because when those become separate, I don't think it's possible to have an organization that's really trustworthy.
How does this work in practice? And is it always so easy to do? Of course, I
would say
reckon that it's probably very difficult to find the right balance between these things.
I would say if you take Larry's tweedism, the analogy for this risk, reward, responsibility cycle would be the mortgage crisis, where certainly in the United States, it's very clear the reward was totally separate from the risk. Right? The mortgage industry got all of the reward, but institutionally and structurally, there was no risk and no responsibility. So when the crash came, the parts of society that bore the cost were not the people who made all the money out of it. It's not like they gave the money back, right? Like this stuff is just gone. Savings are gone. So getting that risk-reward cycle, I'd say when it splits apart, that's really what tweedism is about. Why are you paying so much money to buy government? So you can create exactly the system where you can have reward but not risk.
Yeah.
And it appears very rational because the goal of so much so much human activity is the creation of economic value. And so if you have a system that's really based on pursuit of economics, which is incredibly powerful, for it to be trustworthy, you have to get the risk and reward and responsibility tied together.
How do you translate that to Mozilla?
So exactly, how do you do that? So I would say the tools for making, is that true or not? When you look at an organization, the tools for knowing that are how open and transparent is it in how it works? How much can you understand about the product in how it works? How much do you know who's involved? And how much influence can you have on them? Right, so what we do at Mozilla is we make everything that we can open. And that includes our inner workings as well. Where we run into challenges are in two places. One, a lot of our business partners require confidentiality, which we will do. To be in the commercial marketplace, I think we have to live up to it, but that is a flaw in our trustworthiness, because there's a bunch of stuff there that people can't know, so it makes us less trustworthy than we'd like to be. And so we try to make up with that. So for example, let's take search, which is where most of the money comes into Mozilla, and those agreements are confidential documents. Right, like if it were my document, I'd probably make it public, but it's not all ours. And you know, it makes sense, because the business environment has lots of confidential information, so it makes sense. So what do we try to do? So what's the thing that people worry about? Oh, Google or now Yahoo or somebody is determining product features, or they're telling you what to do, or they're making you build Firefox the way they build Chrome to benefit, their own stuff. So because we can't make the agreements public, what we do is the whole product development cycle is public. You want to know why a feature is a certain way, well, go look at it.
So the process and decision making and
That's
criteria, things like that, you create transparency on that.
Right.
Okay.
And the other thing that we do as Mozilla, and I think is increasingly true for commercial organizations, is we set ourselves up so that we need people to believe in us enough to follow our leadership. Right, so that Mozilla can't really survive and compete in the commercial marketplace at the size we are, at the scope we are. It needs a range of external, non-employee people to sort of believe in it and participate. And so that forces you to be trusted, and if you're good at it, to be trustworthy. Just like we see commercial organizations today, the brand, the relationship of consumers to the brand has changed. And a great brand today has a very vibrant, active user community that feels that brand represents them. And so if you, as the company that, quote, owns the brand, you get out of alignment with your activist consumer base, you get into trouble, right? Because you're not actually, for some reason, you're not going in the direction that your activists need you to go. And so that's a brand topic for commercial organizations, but for Mozilla, that's a topic across everything we do. It's not just our brand, it's our product, it's how we produce it. So that's not just transparency, but actual participation.
Something Mozilla, I believe, does, which I always appreciated, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, I hope not, is that you offer bounties for hackers or so who find security flaws in your products, and that you then get this information, which for you is transparency. It's also a matter of participation, and it makes the overall system safer for everybody. It's also kind of a security by design thing, because it's security in the process thing a little bit. And just to come back to what I said earlier, as a comparison, which is not building trust, is the NSA is spending every year $50 million to buy security flaws, backdoors, etc., but not to close them, not to make them public, but to use them potentially, which makes the overall system less secure for all of us, because those security flaws can also be used by other third parties. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about the NSA a little bit. And so I think the core issue, now I'm going to sound like Larry maybe, I think the core issue there is related to the nature of democracy, in that I know it's easy to think that all the people in the NSA are sort of evil spy people, but I actually think it's probably pretty daunting to be chartered with the national security of a nation state like the United States or probably Germany or Israel today. Like, if I were in the NSA and I felt my job that I was responsible for was to make sure that there were no terrorist attacks in my homeland, I'd be terrified. Like, I think that's a very daunting job. And so I think the people who feel responsible for that, like, that's what they do. They feel responsible for it. Good for them. The issue is that it's very hard for that person to feel like I'm responsible. If something happens, it's my personal failure. And at the same time, that same set of people to evaluate what is the correct line of national security to, I would say, the democratic security of our people. Like, that is a very hard balance, and I don't believe that the intelligence community in secret on its own can be expected to do that. I don't think that fits with human nature, and I think the great failing is somehow or other they have taken it upon themselves to do exactly that. Like, I think no group of people, however well-intentioned and however patriotic and however dedicated to democracy they are, as I believe many of our government civil servants in the NSA and the intelligence community are, no single group of people can hold personal responsibility for this never happening on my watch, and how do I balance that with privacy and security and the individual liberties of democracy? So I think the great failing is we have to get that discussion out in public, because otherwise I don't think we can solve the problem. We can just like be outraged as citizens and not get anywhere.
It brings us probably a little bit away from the original topic, but I still find it hard to understand why the mobile phone of our German Chancellor Angela Merkel has to be tapped because of terrorism. I really can't see the link. And I believe if we talk about basic rights and we talk about juggling two different rights, like privacy on one side and feeling safe and secure on the other, since these are basic rights, those who are most affected from a change in the balance should have a say in that. And that's not the case. Why? We have heard earlier. Because there's an influence not only from within an intelligence system that after the fall of the Iron Curtain felt somehow superfluous and had to find a new reason for existence, but we also have the influence of the green, because it's a giant industry. There are billions on stake. And that's why I said there are probably better ways of investing money than on spying so much, because the effectiveness is to be doubted.
I think I'm saying I think it's also an issue of human nature.
Yeah, that's definitely
exactly
true. Yeah.
Right. So that the outrage at the degree in which we're being surveilled needs to be translated into a public discussion on what is the right answer.
But it should really be a public discussion.
Sure, absolutely.
Not just a cover-up thing, which is what we experience in Germany right now, but that would lead us too far. Coming back to what we were talking about, how to build a trust in an institution. I consider Mozilla to be a role model in that extent. For things you explained, having a whole degree of transparency, participation, and accountability in your own organization. But what I would like to know is how, if, does Mozilla take on responsibility to have somehow an impact on society as a whole, to bring more trust into the system again? Maybe just as a role model, maybe you are engaging in some networks, I don't know.
Okay. I'll just, since we've talked about human nature a little bit, I will say I think each one of us is responsible for ourselves. So I hope Mozilla makes some positive contribution to this, but I don't remotely feel that it's Mozilla's job to save the world for everybody else. Like, We all have lots of assets. But we do hope to, as I said, make a positive contribution. One is a role model. Two is our successes and our failures are very public. So there is some learning there, which isn't always pleasant, but that open source background.
So everybody can learn from.
And they do. I think the open source background gives you a history in your flaws or failures or mistakes being public as well, which is hard to learn. We're really very active in trying to build the technologies of freedom into the future. Like the internet was a step change in computing. The computing environment of the future is data moving over an open protocol at the internet layer, but not currently open at the computing layer, i.e. our phones, computers of the future. So we are Firefox OS is known as a phone piece, but trying to get out there at least a viable working model to actual product about what is a layer of data transmission for our future that is open and transparent and interoperable, and we can all get at it. We're also very active in policy. The net neutrality piece. I was astonished. Both the commissioner and President Obama referenced Mozilla's activities in that. So increasingly active in that area and trying to policy more, but mostly we focus on trying to build products that build in openness and freedom and trying to do it in a way that represents the values of the web. So.
And that's something we highly appreciate.
Well, thank you.
And so thank you for that. Thank you for the insights you shared with us, and we now leave the stage for the next ones to follow. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.